What's up, everybody? Thanks to Jacob. That was a really encouraging, awesome teaching that we just got. And my name's Ben Hall. I'm originally from the Southeast, grew up in Alabama, and then lived in Atlanta. So that's why I don't sound like I'm from Brooklyn, but now I live in Brooklyn, New York. This is where I sleep. This is my bedroom. So I don't even know you guys. We're not even that good of friends, but now we're better friends than most of my friends now. So congratulations on that, I guess, or sorry, or whatever. These are strange times. And they're hard for us. They're complicated because strangeness creates all sorts of things, I guess. But one of the things it certainly can lead us into is fear. What's going on? And what's going to happen next? All kinds of things that not only are different for me, but everybody around me, everybody that's come before me, they've never experienced it before either. So it's not like I can look inside and find answers for how to navigate life. Nor can I look up to other people or look around and find these quick and easy answers because all kinds of things are changing all the time. I want to show you guys. You guys have probably seen this meme before, right? I'm not sure if this is going to show up on the camera. I hope so. Maybe I should have told Ben to put this up. He asked if I had any slides. I said no. But then I thought about it earlier while I was thinking about and praying about this lesson. Have you guys seen this meme right here? Can you see that okay? Whoop, whoop. I'm talking about, oh, there it is. All right, so you've seen this meme, right? Little kid on the roller coaster. And his mom is having fun that he's being tortured here. And the meme saying, God, I have a plan for your life, and what it actually feels like. And that's silly and funny, I guess, whenever people posted silly and funny things on Instagram. But honestly, that's super real, that picture. And those of you who've begun to follow Jesus, you've already probably started experiencing that. And those of you who are thinking about Jesus, you'll experience it more and more. Maybe we'll come back to the roller coaster analogy, if I remember to, at least in a few minutes. But I'd like you to turn to Mark chapter 4, and I'd like to show you a story where some disciples went on a ride with Jesus. And it wasn't exactly a roller coaster, but it was something that terrified them. By the way, do you guys remember the first time you went on a roller coaster? I'm sure there's some of you that are like, I was never scared. I've always felt good on roller coasters, loved them. But most of us, it was a freakish thing. You don't feel very free when they strap you in, click, and you realize there's no more getting out, and the coaster lurches forward, and then it starts making that noise, and you climb up, the whole thing, right? You guys know. And maybe you love them now, but not whenever you first start out. And following the Lord can be that way. In Mark chapter 4, beginning in verse 35, we see a story where the followers of Jesus, the people who knew him, who were with him, his closest disciples, they experienced this. I want to read the end of Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. This is after Jesus had done some of his greatest, most famous teaching that you find in all the Gospels, earlier in Mark 4. And in verse 35, it says, on that day when evening came, he said to them, let us go over to the other side. Okay, no problem. We're out on the Sea of Galilee all the time. We take this trip all the time. Jesus wants to go, probably preach to somebody else, maybe do some other stuff. We'll go, no problem. So leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. But there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. And Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? And he got up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Hush, be still. And the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Then they became very much afraid, and they said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? This story's always fascinating me. I've always imagined what it would have been like to be one of the disciples, right? You've known Jesus, you've followed Jesus, you've loved Jesus, you've seen him do all kinds of wild, amazing, wonderful things. And you think tonight is just going to be kind of a normal night, just a nice little boat ride across the Sea of Galilee. But then everything goes crazy. Everything gets messed up. For one, and then I'll just say this, we know the punchline. The disciples became afraid. That's actually what Jesus challenged them. He says, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Well, it should be pretty obvious, Jesus, why we're afraid. First off, we have horrible circumstances. There's a storm going on, and we're not chicken about storms. We've been through lots of storms. Some of us are guys who literally make our money on boats, on the water. This is a bad storm. Mark even says it was a fierce gale of wind, and the waves are crashing in over the boat. We have really tough circumstances. That's why we're afraid. Second reason they were afraid is those circumstances made them feel powerless. Do you notice how for them, it's just a done conclusion what's going to happen? They come to Jesus and they wake him up, and they don't say, Jesus, can you please do something? We don't know what to do. We're trying to bail out. We're trying to fix this. We're trying to make it. They don't even do that. They just say, we are perishing. They were already in the process. For them, this is my grave. This is where I'll lie for the rest of my, well, I would say the rest of my life, but not the rest of my life. It's over. I'm perishing. They felt powerless. There was no hope to overcome. There was no hope to be able to fix this or deal with this or anything like that. They felt powerless, and so they were afraid. But I want to point out to you what the actual question was they asked. Besides their fear in their circumstances, and besides the fear they had in a feeling of powerlessness, notice what their question is to Jesus. Their real fear is, Teacher, do you not care? Do you not care? I'm going to interpret this question just a little bit, but I think this is a fair way to interpret it. Their question is, Jesus, are we worth it to you? Do we matter? You're lying here sleeping while all our circumstances are falling apart or crashing in on us. We have no power to fix our problem. And here you are sleeping. Are we not worth your time or your interest or your energy or at least your support and compassion? Do you not care? Let me ask you, have you ever been afraid? And by that I mean, have you ever stayed up at night thinking about? Have you ever withdrawn into yourself because of? Have you ever acted like you were really strong and tough or fine and laughed it off and made a joke when you looked around and all your circumstances were falling apart? Senior year wasn't going to be the senior year that you thought. Graduation, YouTube. College, don't know. Your parents' job, we'll see. Everybody on social media talking about everything about what's going on in the world looks kind of hopeless. All your circumstances around you led you to fear. And the reason was because whenever you looked around, you knew there was nothing you could do. You don't have any wisdom to figure this stuff out. You don't have any life experiences that you can build on to navigate. You look yourself in the mirror and like, what are you good at? TikTok? Not even that. I don't have any skills. I don't have any power to be able to overcome the problems in my life. And then your girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with you. Or nobody's ever wanted to be with you, to break up with you in the first place. Maybe it's something in your home. Your siblings don't really love you or support you. Maybe your parents are kind of absent, or maybe your parents aren't even there. And you wonder every day while you're looking at Instagrams of the most beautiful women in the world, or you're listening to other people who are intelligent or smart, and you're trying to be an imposter and pretend like you are too. But when you look yourself in the mirror after you brush your teeth and you're getting ready to go to bed, you look there and you say, why would anybody care about me anyways? I'm not really worth it. Could anybody? We're afraid because our circumstances, because our powerlessness, because we wonder, and we're pretty sure we know what the answer is, even though we don't want to admit it. We wonder if we're worth anything anyways. I gotta be honest, I hope that's not you. But I've met and known way too many people, including the person in the mirror, who have struggled with those fears. And I think, I don't know, maybe because it's, we're on our first rodeos, we're more afraid when we're younger. Me and my wife have a couple of kids, so I'm a new father. And I genuinely get afraid about a lot of things. I feel really powerless to be able to protect my kids from a lot of bad stuff. The circumstances, I think about the circumstances around our life here in Brooklyn, New York. I can't fix those. I can't change those. And that messes things up and makes it hard. And then a lot of times I wonder, man, am I worth it as a father? Like, am I doing it right for them? And look, I know I'm supposed to get my head screwed on right and pray and trust God and all that stuff, but that's hard sometimes. And that's what Jesus says is the issue, though. It is about trust. Because ultimately, we fear things that we trust. Does that make sense? For instance, if you think being beautiful is what will give you worth, then you fear not being beautiful. If you think people's approval, like Jacob talked about in his lesson, is really critical to building up your life, then you fear losing that approval because you trust in that. You would build your life on that. You have faith in that thing. Jesus said the reason why they were afraid in adverse circumstances, when they were powerless, where it didn't seem like Jesus cared, Jesus said, why are you afraid? And then he basically answers it when he says, do you still have no faith? Now you might say, wow, that's a pretty offensive question, Jesus. They were following you. They don't have no faith. I mean, maybe a little problem with faith, but no faith. I want you to pin that in your brain, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes as far as why they had no faith. But I want to really briefly look at the story at the beginning of Mark chapter 5 with you. I had a little story where Jesus showed them why they needed to learn to have faith in him so that he could help them overcome their fears. And I'm going to suggest to you that this story at the beginning of Mark chapter 5, if you'll let it sink into your heart, or if you're new to Jesus, or if you're trying to develop a relationship with Jesus, if you'll let this be a gateway for you into a deeper relationship with Jesus, and a gateway for reading all the stories of Jesus, this may build your faith so that you'll be able to overcome your fears. By the way, not eradicate your fears, not to eliminate any of those doubts that creep into your mind, but to learn how to cope and to learn how to overcome them every time they creep up, every time they try to enslave you again. If you learn to have faith in Jesus, then you can be free from all of your fears in Jesus. Mark chapter 5, verse 1. They came to the other side of the sea. Like Jesus said, let's go to the other side. They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gaskins. And when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, that is Jesus. The man had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, superhuman strength. Because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and the mountains and gashing himself with stones. Can you see this guy? Can you picture him? Like, just, if you need to close your eyes or just think about it a little bit, I want you to imagine this dude. All right, so you show up on the other side of the sea, and it's in the country of the Gaskins. It's a place where Jews probably normally wouldn't have liked to hang out because of the type of people that would have lived there. So you're kind of in a spooky place if you're one of the disciples. By the way, you just had the most scary night of your life, so you're kind of on edge anyways. So you pull up, and you get on the boat, and you're pulling it up. And we're going to find out in the text in just a second that this guy was running at Jesus. Luke tells us explicitly, and Mark's going to hint at it in a second, that the guy was naked. All right, so add that to the visual if you want to, or not. But anyway, naked guy running down the hill. And it says that he was screaming night and day. So he's yelling and screaming, ah! And the man is scarred up because he's been cutting himself, gashing himself with stones. Besides that, I don't know if they could see chains on the beach there as they pulled up, or maybe the guy had like a half-broken shackle on his arm or his leg. I don't know what it was. But the visual here is striking. And actually, it's striking to see it from the disciples' perspective, like, whoa, this would be really scary. But it actually is even worse whenever you think about it and rewind the tape and get into this guy's life. The demons possess him all his life. Maybe he's been a nice guy. Maybe he was a bad guy. Maybe that's why the demons got him. I don't know. But whatever happened, his circumstances changed dramatically. Just like that. He went from a regular guy to a man possessed by demons. A man who was so tortured that he would have to scream night and day out of, who knows, the agony, the torture that the demons were doing, trying to get them out. I don't know. Besides that, he was powerless to overcome the demons in such a way that he could remain in his home with his friends, with his family. Notice the text there says he couldn't be bound with shackles and chains. It's almost like Mark is like, oh yeah, I should add this detail. He often had been chained up. Why do they chain people up? I mean, normally, why should you chain people up? Well, because they're a threat. How many kids had this guy terrorized? How many families had this guy messed up? Had he hurt people? I don't know. But I know, while in one respect he looks like a man with all power, he was powerless when faced with the demons that took control of his life and ruined everything. And I'll tell you, nothing would tell you, we don't want you here, buddy, more than chains. I don't know if the people drove him out, or if the demons let him out, or if he felt the pain of not being worth anything anymore, not being cared for. So who cares? Clothes, don't need them. Because my neighborhood, the only people that live here are the dead people. I'm out here in the tombs where nobody will miss me, nobody will care, and frankly, they all wish I was dead anyways. I always wonder, and I got to say, I recognize it may be possible that there may be even people on this stream that struggle with this. I always wonder why he gashed himself with stones. I know why different friends of mine throughout the years did that or have done that. Because they just felt like trash. And they were afraid that their life was so numb and so meaningless, they just had to feel something out of the fear that there was nothing left. This guy's life embodies all of our worst fears. But then he met Jesus. Seeing Jesus from afar, verse 6, the story continues. He ran up and bowed down before him. By the way, in the Gospel of Mark, read through it, you'll notice everybody when they meet Jesus, they bow down. It's a feature in Mark especially. But he wants you to see Jesus is not a normal person. Jesus is somebody with tremendous power, somebody with sovereign rule over everything, including your fears. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." Torment? Jesus would never torment anybody. The reason he said this was because, verse 8, Jesus had been saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus was asking him, that is the man. Jesus was talking to the spirit a second ago, now he's talking to the man. "What's your name?" And the man said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Isn't that trippy? This guy had lost his sense of personal identity. My, first person, singular, my name is Legion. For we, now the demon's name is my name. Even though I recognize I'm a separate entity, they just taking control. The thing that's the cause of all my fears coming true, it's taken over my person. Does that ever happen to you? Where your fears take control. They dictate your behaviors, your relationships, your attitude, your view of the future, your performance in school, your interest in anything, everything is messed up when your fears take control of who you are. That's what had happened to this guy. My name is the name of my fears. My name is Legion, for we are many. And the man began to implore Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the country. Isn't that weird? The thing that was ruining this guy's life, he couldn't imagine life without it. He was afraid that if I lose this thing, then who am I? Now I'm just a crazy guy with no clothes in the tombs and trying to go back to people who had me chained up. If I lose the demons, who am I even? Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. And the demons implored Jesus, saying, "Send us into the swine that we may enter them." While the man may have thought he could hold on to the demons knew it was game over. It's a done deal. And so Jesus gave them permission. They didn't know what they were asking for because they came out and they entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. The herdsmen who saw this, and I love this visual, like there's some dudes, I don't know, maybe they're sitting under a tree, just hanging out, probably just texting their girlfriends. I don't know what they were doing under there. But anyway, they look up, they see the whole scene. They see Jesus and his posse roll up on the shore. They see the guy run down the hill. They see this little interaction, and then the swine, which these guys apparently were watching on behalf of maybe owners in the town nearby. These guys see the swine start stirring, and then poof, they take off. They run down the bank, and bam, they're in the sea. And so it's understandable, verse 14, their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and the country. They're like, "Hey, you can't believe what just happened. I got to tell you about this thing." And they tell everybody. And they came to Jesus, and they observed the man who had been demon-possessed, sitting down, not running, not hurting himself, not screaming like crazy. sitting down, clothed, not naked anymore, and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion. And they became frightened because they saw, whoa, 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 whoa. We knew you were powerless against your fears. We knew your circumstances were devastating. We knew that you didn't matter anymore. And now, bang, it's all different. What is going on here? Who could do this? It's exactly parallel to what happened in the boat. The disciples who were in this adverse circumstance, who had no power, who didn't know if Jesus cared about them, at the end of it, after Jesus fixed everything, after Jesus stopped the wind and the waves and demonstrated his power and his care and his ability to change the circumstances for their good, at the end of it, remember what they said in chapter 4? They became very much afraid. The people do the same thing. They're frightened now at the power of Jesus, the care of Jesus, the world-transforming abilities of Jesus. So those who had seen it described to them, verse 16, how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave their region. I want to stop right there for just a second and pause to make some observations about this story and what it taught the disciples and what it would teach us. All the things that this man could have, should have been afraid of, and actually all the things inside this man that all the people in the town were afraid of, Jesus changed it just like that. Circumstances, well, you saw it at the end of the story. We dealt with the nudity situation, got the guy addressed, important. We stopped with the screaming and the self-harm. He's sitting down in his right mind. Jesus changed all that, just like that. And notice how effortless it was for Jesus, right? The demon said, hey, can we go to the swine? Just like, yeah, sure. Bam, it's over. Everything's changed in the blink of an eye, just like that. Just like on the sea, all the circumstances changed. Because Jesus demonstrated his power. This legion, and the word legion was a reference to a large unit of Roman soldiers. And so the imagery here would be that it was just, this guy was just overrun with spiritual forces that were like an army that had taken control of his whole life. And Jesus had so much power within himself that they beg, the demons, a legion of demons, beg this carpenter from Nazareth. They beg him, please let us do this. And he says, yeah, sure. And they obey. Just like the wind and the waves stopped, the demons gone. Jesus had power over their fears. Now you might say, wait a second, the three things that you talked about were adverse circumstances, bad circumstances, powerlessness, and wondering if you're worth it. Or in other words, wondering if Jesus cares. Do you not care? That was the big question. And frankly, I don't know about you guys, but my guess is that's the big one we all struggle with the most. Do I matter? Does God care about me? Because I've done some really bad stuff. I'm watching pornography every night. I've been sending pictures to my boyfriend that I shouldn't be sending. And I'd be embarrassed if anybody ever found them. I'm a liar, almost compulsively, because I care so much about not hurting people's feelings or having a good image in front. I just lie all the time. I'm obsessed with my image. You keep going down the list of whatever your thing is, and you're like, God couldn't love me. God couldn't care about me. I mean, even just baseline, if I was a good person, I don't know if he'd care about me. What's there to care about? And then I got all this bad stuff. I love how Jesus demonstrates his care to this man. Maybe you don't see it, other than I guess taking the demons out. It's a pretty good way to show his care. But actually, I love it early in the story. I imagine being one of the disciples, and I'm terrified. We got Chain Man here, scars, yelling, screaming. And I don't know if he looked like a skinny Bruce Banner or if he looked like the Hulk as far as the superpower stuff, whatever it is, I don't know. But I know he would have been scary, just like the storm was scary. And then I would have been totally tripped out whenever this guy is, please don't die, all this stuff. And maybe he had a weird voice because he had demons. I don't know. But then Jesus takes the time in the midst of this thing and says, hey, what's your name? Now, some would say that Jesus was just asking the question so that he could show just how powerful he was about to be. And maybe that's it. Do you know what I think? I think Jesus asked him his name because Jesus just wanted to know his name. maybe to say it better, Jesus wanted him to know that Jesus wanted to know his name. I mean, Jesus kind of knew everything, so he didn't need to ask. But Jesus wanted him to know that he wanted to know his name. You know, later in this chapter, there's a woman who does like a drive-by healing. You remember that story where she grabs Jesus' garment, boom, she gets healed. And Jesus asked her to come back and to basically tell the whole story, kind of risking it. But the reason was because Jesus wanted to show her, hey, I care about you. At the end of it, he said, daughter, go in peace because your faith has made you well. Jesus cared. And Jesus cared about this man. By the way, where do you think the guy got clothes? Maybe, I don't know, maybe he had a closet back in one of the tombs. But my guess is those clothes, either Jesus was like, hey, Peter, listen, man, it's your turn. Give this guy your jacket. I don't know. But I have to believe Jesus somehow provided for this man. Do you see my point? Jesus cared enough. Jesus cared enough to go across the sea to totally freak out his disciples. Jesus went all the way across the sea and told to help this man, to show this man, I care about you and I want you. And so whenever they got back in that boat, the disciples learned the lesson. Yeah, he does care when we're perishing. And even though we're powerless, he's got all power. The demons beg him. A legion of demons begs him permission to go into pigs. And as far as our circumstances, well, he can change them just like that. He just hushes the wind and the waves. He just says a word and the demons go. But you know, even if all my circumstances don't change, I think I can trust him anyways. I think I'll be all right. You know, this man at the end of the story, he wanted all of his circumstances to change. In verse 18, it says he begged Jesus to go with him. But Jesus said no. By the way, weird thing. The man begs Jesus, please don't torture me. Don't take the demons out. Jesus didn't listen. The demons beg Jesus to go in the swine. Jesus is like, yeah, sure. Jesus answered the prayer of demons. You see that? And then the people beg Jesus, can you please leave? And Jesus is like, all right, if you don't want me. By the way, Jesus will never force you. He will never force his way in. He's not abusive. And then here the man asked to do a good thing. The thing, by the way, that Jesus would ask people to do. The guy says, hey, I want to follow you. And Jesus says, no. He didn't let him, but he said, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. You know, Jesus changed some of his circumstances, but some of his circumstances got a lot harder because discipleship is a wild ride, kind of like that roller coaster. You buckle in and you don't really know where it's going to go or what it's going to be like or what it's going to feel like. You know, when this guy went back to his home, how do you think people reacted? This is the guy who was terrorizing the whole town, the guy who ran around with his clothes off, the guy who was screaming all night and day. We chained him up. We got him out of here. And now he's coming back telling us about some Lord? You kidding me? Jesus said, go do it. Strap in. Come for a ride. The amazing thing is he did, without any real questions. I guess because he had seen that he could trust Jesus, he was willing to have faith to overcome the fears of going back to the hardest places he could have gone. I love that about this part of chapter 5, is everybody submitting to the word of Jesus. The demons submit to the word of Jesus. The man submits to the word of Jesus. And I wonder when they got back in the boat, if one of the disciples realized, oh, that's what he meant by do you still have no faith? You know, you may be sitting there, you may be like, dude, I get it. Like, I should trust Jesus to overcome my fears. How do I even do that? You know that verse that gets quoted a lot of times from Romans chapter 10? Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. You know why the disciples, Jesus could say about them, do you still have no faith? Look at verse 35. What did Jesus say to them when they got in that boat? Jesus said to them, let's get in the boat, see what happens. Is that what yours says? Mine either. Jesus said, let's go to the other side. Now, when their circumstances changed and they felt powerless and it seemed like Jesus didn't care about them, they said, it's all over. We are perishing. And Jesus says, were you listening? I didn't say, let's go into the sea and perish. I said, let's go to the other side. And I know sometimes your circumstances make it seem like it's all over. I know that sometimes you're going to feel powerless. And I know actually sometimes it may feel like I don't care. When I send you into a mission like the demon-possessed man, where it seems like it's just going to be harder and worse than anything you could have ever imagined. Like I don't care, like I'm insensitive. But I do. You got to trust my word. And I know sometimes I may lead you into circumstances that are challenging. And I tell you guys right now, you're in a moment in your life and in history and in your world. It's wild. It's crazy. It's messed up. And I'm not even talking about the pandemic. I'm not even talking about social unrest. I'm talking about trying to be a Christian in 2020, trying to really love Jesus and follow him. And there's so many forces against you. You say, man, how can I do this? And how is it? I'm afraid. And I don't know how this is going to work. And Jesus says, I know. Let's go to the other side. Come with me. Listen to my word. I want to challenge you with something, and I want to give you a word of encouragement from the end of the story. And then I think it's my time to shut up so we can have some dialogue here. If you're sitting there, and I don't care if you really believe in Jesus, or if you think you may believe in Jesus a little bit, especially if you're someone who's like, I don't know about this. By the way, if you're in that category, thank you for being a part of this and for listening. Be in Jesus's word. And that's the whole Bible, I know, but I'm talking like the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Read the stories over and over again, because I'll tell you, what we believe in is not just a set of ideals. It's not just a set of philosophies, and it's certainly not simply a set of rules. There's philosophies, there's ideals, there are rules, but they're all rooted in our faith in this person, in this one who can make the demons obey him and who calms the wind and the waves and who loves you so desperately that he went into the storm. He dove into your sin and your mess. He dove into this world and he went to the cross to save you from your sins, to show you that his power can overcome your sin. That no matter what circumstances surround you, he'll liberate you from those. He'll set you free, as our brother talked about, because he genuinely cares. He cares enough to take up that cross for you. And so he says, just trust me. Just trust me and listen to me. If you want to develop your faith in Christ, I'm challenging you right now. I don't know what you got going on. Maybe you got a good job. Maybe you got a lot of activities. Maybe you got summer school. Sorry, that's a bummer for you. But especially this summer, if you've got time, just make it your mission to read all the Gospels at least once. And read them like it's a fresh biography of some person that you've heard is amazing. Learn about him. Fall in love with him. Learn to trust him. Look at him as the one who will take care of you forever. That's my challenge to you. And here's my word of, back to our roller coaster thing, my word of excitement. You know, before a roller coaster, when you're a little kid, you're nervous. I don't know how this is going to go. This ride's going to be tough. And your big brother or your friend, maybe they're peer pressuring you, or maybe if they were kind and gracious, they're like, hey man, listen, it is scary, but it's awesome. And if you just do it, you're going to love it. You know, this man, the demon-possessed man who got sent out by Jesus, it says there in verse 20 that everyone was amazed, or they wondered. I love that word, they wondered. A few chapters later in the book of Mark, at the end of chapter 7, Jesus came back to the same region. The region that had driven him out said, get out of here. We don't want you here. Jesus came back at the end of Mark 7. And you're like, okay, cool, whatever. But in those days, in Mark chapter 8, Jesus fed, it was one of those times where Jesus fed thousands of people who had gathered to hear him preach. I wonder, man, how'd that happen? How'd it happen that in this place where nobody really wanted Jesus around, he comes back and there are literally thousands gathered to listen to him. And they stayed so long, they didn't have food. How'd that happen? Get out of here to, hey, we can't even leave to go get a snack. Let me tell you my theory. I think it was a guy with scars, a guy that only had one change of clothes that a carpenter from Nazareth had hooked him up with. It was a guy who went around telling everybody he could meet about all the fears that had ruled him before, but how now he believed, he had faith in someone who could overcome them all. He told them how the Lord had had mercy on him and the great power he had shown him. He told them that all his circumstances were ruined, but Jesus changed them all, just like that. He told them how he was powerless, but then he was set free and he was empowered to do great things. And he told them how he was chosen as the first apostle. Now, don't get me wrong. He wasn't one of the 12 apostles. But the word apostle means someone who's sent out. You know, the 12, they had been chosen, but they had not been sent out yet. This is the first person that Jesus ever said, hey, I want you to go preach. That's how much Jesus cared about him. He cared about him enough to set him free and to make him part of his grand work. And I wonder if that demon-possessed guy was there. I wonder if he was in the crowd. I wonder if he went and met Jesus again. I wonder if maybe he just sat there, and as they were passing out the bread and fish, he just took his share, and he looked at what he had in his hands, and he looked at the people all around. And he thought, this is the great things that the Lord has done through me and how he had mercy on me. That's all my imagination. I don't know if that happened. But I do know this, that this man and the work that he did in the gospel of our Lord brought him to not only a wonderful place personally, it gave him the opportunity to see the wonders of God. And I'm telling you right now, I know strapping in and going up that first hill on the roller coaster and following Jesus, it's a scary ride. Some of it because of the circumstances, some of it because what Jesus will put you in. Jesus will put you in a frightening position. Right here, these stories prove it. But I promise you, if you'll fix your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, you'll see wonders. Thank you guys for your attention. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really happy we could talk a little bit.
Welcome to my office, by the way, and Talon and I welcome you. This is where I sleep, just so you know. No, not really. We're going to get the swing of this, but I wanted to go back to that roller coaster analogy because it does just fit. Yeah, and like you said, forget our particular time. It fits the time of life a lot of young people are in, where you're on what feels like this perpetual roller coaster. And you know, I had older people telling me when I was younger, you know, you have ups, you have downs, you have highs, you have lows. But I think what we don't always express is just how exhausting it gets to put your hope somewhere only to have it just crash on you. And it just gets exhausting to kind of deal with that. And so I just wanted to put that out there to you again, and just this idea that it's not that the fear ever goes away or that you ever get rid of this up and down experience, but maybe just the question, how does Jesus actually center us in being able to endure, and maybe even, probably a better way to put it, grow from those up and down experiences?
Yeah. You know, I'm actually reading a book right now called The Training of the 12. And it's a super old book, and he writes in super old ways. But it's awesome because it's just about these dudes and how Jesus was like, hey, I want you guys to come follow me, and I'm just going to kind of show you the way. And it's been really comforting to me because that whole up and down thing, seeing how the 12, the disciples went through that, it's this guy, this writer, he's drawing it out in a way that's helping me see the mirror image of like, oh, yeah. And on one hand, it's kind of convicting. Like, man, I got to step my game up. I got to get better. I got to grow. But actually, even more than that, it's comforting to me to be like, you know what? These dudes messed up a lot. And even after the Gospels, they messed up even more. But that it wasn't like they were faulty, like they were any kind of problematic disciples or whatever. It's just how it works. And that's really comforting me that it is that way. So you just got to keep going. You just got to ride the wave, you know, and just whatever comes next, just keep it going.
Well, and this is why I wanted you to talk about this. I knew you'd be perfect at this. You're such an encourager, and the idea of seeking perfection even in my life. And I know we have a lot of great students, and they're trying to get that A, and they're trying to look for that great college application, and they're trying to hit that great career. And really a lot of the dealing with the ups and downs, it just may be changing our perspective, as you're kind of showing us here. And with your eyes fixed on Jesus, what's important becomes different, right? And so the goal is, he's the one who's perfect. How can I, imperfectly, but with great effort, really seek him? No, I think so. Share those. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if this is a good place to throw this in, but I was thinking in Hebrews 12, the passage that we're keying in on this weekend, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Later in the text, I love the language where he talks about, hey, you know what God's doing with you? He's disciplining you. And not like in the punishing, like you're so bad, smack, you know, that kind of, I think usually when we hear the word discipline, that's what we think. But being a disciple means that you're learning. Being disciplined means you're growing, you're changing. And I love the image in verse 10, where it says, talking about our fathers, they disciplined us for a short time, as seemed best to them. Like our dads did our best, or their best, or maybe they didn't, but ideally good fathers would. And obviously lots of people don't have that experience, unfortunately, tragically. But theoretically, fathers are supposed to do the best they can. But God disciplines us for our good. And I love this line, so that we may share his holiness.
Yeah.
So my thought is, if that's the level we're getting to, we're going to share his holiness. That's freakish. Like, that's freakish. That's so high. That's so much more than anything I could dream of. And so I should expect it to be a long ride with a lot of ups and downs. I just got to keep going and keep letting God work. And if I do, verse 11, all discipline, all the stuff like riding in a, terrifying boat ride or going to my hometown who I freaked everybody out, all that stuff, it's not joyful, but it's sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. And I love that line, afterward, it yields this amazing depth and change. And I mean, you've been on this ride longer than even me and Talon or anybody that's tuned in. I mean, you know that better than us, but all of us, I think we see that the longer we go. I'm talking too much here, but go ahead.
No, you're not. And it's comforting. And I just want to add to that, kind of what you're speaking to is maybe the disillusionment of younger Christians that I thought this was going to be easy. And in learning from older Christians, those who've been through it before, I think what happens maybe unintentionally is they've weathered so many storms, and you mentioned this in your talk, they're just not as surprised by it. And a lot of times we read, kind of like the disciples with the calmness of Jesus, we read that as not caring, not understanding what we're going through. And so at some level, we have to be better at communicating, I get that you're in a panic over this right now. And it's not good enough to just say, you won't care as much about this later on. And so I think maybe getting to the root of what makes us so concerned about those things is really good, because it'll answer that question, does Jesus care? I know for my family, we've just been settling in this week on Ephesians 4:14. And the idea there is, the Christian should be growing. None of us are perfect. We're, like you said, trying to grow into this holiness, which we brought none to the table. And so it's a major transformation. There's discipline involved. But as we do that, if we seek that, and I loved your challenge about getting in the Word, we stop being so easily pulled back and forth, tossed to and fro with every teaching that's out there. And this is one thing I've noticed now. And every one of those teachings, Paul tells us, has a little bit of truth in it. And it pulls us back and forth. And the answer he gives in verse 15 is, then you teach the truth in love. And so along with your challenge to get into the Word and really have that in you, how would you encourage these young people to live that out once they read it? Because I know the temptation is, I got to post it, I got to put it out there. What's maybe the most effective way to get that word out there?
Man, that's an awesome question. Yeah, and I wonder what you and Tom would say. I guess I'm thinking about a couple of things. And to make sure I understand, you're saying like the question is like, we read the Word, how do we get it like inside of us to where it really like affects change? So that's what you're getting at, right? Yeah. Well, I think one thing is not only reading the Bible privately, but, like I remember there were like a few junctures in my life where I was like, oh, this was like a level up where God took me somewhere. And one time where God leveled me up was I was a senior in high school, and me and a couple of my friends, one of my friends, he was a year older. He was moving to the town or near the town where I grew up to go to college. I was going into my senior year. He was going to be a freshman in college. He was going to have an apartment, and we were talking, and I was like, hey man, you want to like do a Bible study? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. That'd be awesome. So it was just us. Like, we didn't have any adults, and it wasn't like a rebellious thing. We were just like, let's just do it. Let's just read the Bible, figure it out. So we'll start with something easy. So we'll do Romans. So we did Romans our first summer.
Smart.
We just were like reading Romans. Idiots. Didn't know. But not idiots. Like, it was great. And honestly, it was me and him and his roommate and my sister, first Bible study, right? Just four of us. And we lived in a place where there were a lot of young Christians. But then like after that, a couple of weeks later, it was like a few more people came. By the end of that summer, we would have like 20, 25 people in this one little room. And then that kept going. And then like all those people started going to college in different places, and they did that where they were. But here's what it did. I know there was stuff we said that I'm sure was totally bogus on Romans. And we tried to be disciplined, like we had a rotation of who was going to teach each week. But we were just like, hey, we're just going to read the chapter and we're going to talk about it. And what that did for me is my life culture needs to be not just my faith is private, but it's something that I'm engaging with my brethren on, and I'm talking, and we're wrestling through stuff. We're trying to help each other.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up. Now, think about the danger had your idea to have this study of Romans with all you came to the table information-wise with, right, was I'm going to put every new idea I have in this study online for all to read. And you can imagine what you would have gotten. And I'll tell you, because this is the way it all works, you would have had older, well-meaning people berate you in a way they didn't intend to, but because of the way they speak, having been through it, to one who hasn't, it would have discouraged you. You would have had people that really could care less about the word, but just wanted to get to you, punch in there and get at that. There's such an ability to reach wider audiences in our social media fronts, and yet such a danger that we discourage what we're trying to do. And your idea, and I want to get back to this in a second, I want to give you a second to talk, but you're talking about a face-to-face, life-changing fellowship over just,
That's right.
Here's my belief. Go ahead.
No, and well, I don't think I add to that. You mentioned the older people thing, because that's another thing that has helped me a lot in the Word of God. Like a lot of people I'm sure watching this, I would go to camps and I would meet older people who influenced me, right?
Yeah.
But even there was this one particular older preacher who was like a retired preacher, and he would teach these classes in the winter, like 8 weeks. It was Thursday nights. It was like an hour away from where I lived. And I just knew he's a good Bible teacher. It was like Life and Epistles of Paul, the Psalms, whatever. And I would go to those classes. And then I'd like stick around and I'd ask him questions. And I don't even know why I did. Maybe because we were having those Bible studies. I was like, hey, what do you think about Romans 11? He's like, dude, what is this guy? This guy, But that actually kind of turned into like this real friendship. When I was in college, I never asked to preach anywhere or be a preacher, but it just sort of started happening where I was doing it. And so I'd have breakfast with this older preacher like once a month and just pick his brain and ask him questions and talk to him about what I was struggling with or whatever. And besides connecting with my friends like that, opening the Word of God and having fun, by the way. I mean, after we'd do that, we'd go to Arby's and do the 5 for $5, or we'd go to Taco Bell and we'd just hang out, and it was awesome. Those friendships really solidified that. But besides that time of fellowship in the Word of God together, as well as a devotion privately to trying to read the Word, getting counsel from people who I looked at as like, this person loves God and they love the Word, and I'm gonna lean into that. That made a huge difference as far as embedding the Word. And then anyway, go ahead.
No, so what you're speaking to this, and you brought it up with the man in the tombs, which is always, I just feel like you can't get around Mark 5 when it comes to what this ought to look like evangelistically. So there is a natural evangelism in the Bible that is, by not understanding it, has been the biggest part of my lowest lows and my deepest downs. Is when I see something so clearly, I believe I should just be able to put it out there and they'll all get it. As if at any point in Jesus' ministry, that's the way the teaching went, right? That the discipline wasn't there. It's just going to happen. And so to avoid that frustration is this idea that the best evangelism, natural evangelism, comes from a changed life. And you mentioned with the setup to what's going on in that region is this man. And I think it's more than less than speculation, because you've got Samaria that immediately receives the gospel, having been rejected by the Jews. Well, what made that happen? Well, there was a woman. One woman that Jesus talks to that convinces everybody in town until they believe on their own. And then years later, when Philip's there, they're set up. They're there. So our lives, and I want our young people to know that, like you said, get with teachers that can teach you. This guy right here 2 years ago walked into my office just wanting to study. He doesn't know how much he encouraged me. Just getting, and we picked the minor prophets because, hey, that's pretty easy picking. So we just went through there.
Easy, yeah.
Super exciting, the growth that we experience and the connection that you make with the Word. And those are the things that will ground us, keep us from being tossed around. I love that example. Talon, you got thoughts here?
Yeah, Ben, if I can ask you a few questions about your life and getting in the boat and ready to cross over, just from your personal experience, because I'm sure a lot of our young people, just like me, at a lot of times are wondering, is this the direction I need to go? What steps am I about to take? What was it for you that made you decide to leave Alabama and go somewhere else?
There was an older preacher in Atlanta that worked with a church there, and I was getting ready to graduate. I was at a state university, UAB, and he called me. He was like, "Hey," he said it nicer, but basically the pitch was like, "Hey, we're looking for like a younger guy who can kind of teach the Bible to lost people, because we got all these opportunities, but we also want somebody who really doesn't know what he's doing, so we can help him actually develop. You want to do that?" And I'm sure he said it nicer than that, but that was basically the thing. So, my initial answer was like, well, no, I'm planning on going to grad school, and I want to work overseas in international development stuff. And so I don't think I want to be like a preacher. That's not my goal. I was teaching a lot and I was preaching. By the time I was graduating, I was getting ready to preach every time, but I'm saying that a little bit tongue in cheek, but that really was like the story. And I guess that's been the thing for me is like, whenever providentially or through conviction, I hope, I hope I do this more. But I think the thing is, like, whenever you see something good to do, you just say yes, if you can. And we can't do all the good stuff we want to do. But if it's something I actually can do, then I think I should say yes and go for it.
I want to add something because I know you real well, Ben, and I appreciate how much time you spend in the world. I mean, word, not world. Although, hey, you're in the world, but not of it. And I appreciate that about you. But
Let's hope.
we all like this romantic picture of, I'm going to get the call and it's going to change my life and I'm going to go here. The reality of your life is you were finding yourself more and more drawn to Jesus wherever you were. You had plans, you had goals, but it wasn't a surprise, I don't think, that someone would look at you and say, Jesus is moving this guy in this direction. And I want all our young people to realize, if you want growth, if you want maturity, if you want the kind of peace that comes from fellowship in the light, it doesn't come with a phone call. You actually have to start that process on your own and make that step. And maybe what's holding them up, based on your talk that I liked, was the idea that we sometimes are so shocked by what we've not done or done with our lives. The last place we'd go is Jesus. We just feel like that's too much to ask of him. But whether it's the storm or the demon-possessed man, Jesus is not surprised by what he finds. I think it ought to start surprising us that we wouldn't go there first. And I know that about you. Like you're drawn there. So maybe looking back, digging into what it was about you. What is it that keeps that process going? Because it's not easy to grow in Christ. So what is it that keeps you through the ups and downs? Keep going back to the one who's asleep on the boat. Keep going back to the one who's not afraid of the demons. What kind of builds that as a process?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Maybe before I get to that, maybe I can think about it and talk at the same time. But what you were saying, like, you're right. It's not like a magical phone call and then your life's like, oh, wow, okay. When I was a kid, I remember, I think it was right after 9/11, like some people from the Watchtower organization, knocked on the door and they're like, you want to study the Bible? And I was like, sure, we can do that. And he was like, hey, I'd just been baptized pretty soon before that. My dad, like, he's an engineer. He's not a preacher or whatever. I mean, he preached the gospel and he would teach. He was like, I want you to come with me. And so I went with him like every week to this Bible study and just we tried to talk to this guy. One of my friends converted to another religion and he emailed me and was trying to convert me. And then I was like, well, I guess we should talk because I don't think I want to be this. And I think I want you to be a Christian again, and just all those tiny little opportunities. And then it was like, we'd have gospel meetings and I had a driver's license. So I was like, okay, I guess I should take a stack of these cards because I got time. And I went to I lived in this little town. I grew up in a double wide trailer and I'd go to the other trailer parks and knock on doors and like, be like, hey, you want to come to church? And here's a thing. And nice to meet you. Bye-bye. And that kind of thing. It's not something magical. It's just every time you see something good you're supposed to do, just try to do it and mess up and learn from it and try to do it again, And I think that paired with a genuine belief in this man who was the God man, who did radical things, who said things that nobody could have ever dreamed of, who died and who rose again. If you really, really believe that, and then you just do your best every day to do the little tiny stuff, and then as the tiny stuff turns into bigger stuff, then you just keep trying to do it. And I think those are the two things to me. There's probably a lot more things, so that's a silly thing to say, the two things, but you know what I mean? There's a couple things.
No, and it was a very broad question. I'm asking you to look back on your life and think about how God actually developed the direction of your path. But I see it in you, and you mentioned earlier about not being good at TikTok, which made me think that whole thing, social media, everything is about us finding a name. And when I say us, I'm talking about younger people. I've kind of given up on the name at this point. But the truth is how God developed you into who you are and the name that matters. And I love that you spoke to this in Mark 5. For Jesus to ask this guy his name had to sound crazy to the disciples. They didn't want anything to do with this guy. But you're right. He's trying to bring this man's identity out into the open. And there's a lot that he learns from his name. But it's like, how are you called or how are you known? And as I look at you kind of telling your story growing up, because I can relate to that, there were moments when I decided that his name was bigger than my name.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that change. Handing out those cards, going to that class, none of it ever probably in the moment felt comfortable. I've been in many situations with older Christians growing up or my dad or whatever, where I was not happy to be there, let alone comfortable. but going through it reminded me, I think we were there because his name matters. And so I think for all of us to just imagine that Jesus is asking our name and he wants it to be his name, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
And you said, just saying yes to more things for his name. What are some things you got going on right now in Brooklyn? I know you guys have been really kind of closed in, but maybe things you used in the past to help bring that younger generation into knowing you wear his name. Let's get that name out there. What are some things that kind of helped your younger people and you reach out to them?
Yeah. That's an awesome question. I mean, to me, and I'm not sure, I may be missing the question a little bit with this response, but trying to maintain an authenticity, meaning like I'm not I think we've all got to try to not be afraid of the things we really believe in from the Lord, to stick with those, compassion, conviction, all that stuff, but also an authenticity with, yeah, man, I'm pretty much struggling with this. Like, I don't really know what to say about that. Like, I've been crying over that, that kind of thing. And maybe that's a little too buzzwordy and everybody's into authenticity, but I think there's like a put on authenticity that's not really authenticity, right? That's just like, everybody's bad, I'm bad, you're bad. Like, that's not really authenticity. I'm talking about the authenticity that says, here's what I'm struggling with, but also here's what I'm really all about. And here's what really matters to me. And here's what I think should matter to you, and calling each other into that. I think that's a pretty meaningful and enriching way for us to go with each other.
Yeah, and doing it perfect, again, going back to what our fears are, isn't the issue. You reminded me, talking about passing out, tracts or handouts or invites. We were able to go, I was able to go with a couple of friends to Jamaica about 20 years ago, and our first trip. And when I went there, we had a group of high school kids with us. And we thought, well, we're going to be preaching all week. So if you guys could just kind of go out and try and see if anybody's interested in Bible study, tell them we'll be preaching tonight. And a lot of these kids, I mean, you could tell they were terrified by that prospect. Now, they're in a foreign country and a place they've never been, and they're people they don't know. But they were standing there. I remember the marketplace was here. They're across the road, and they were you could see the terror. And I didn't want to bring them into this horrific experience. When one woman comes across the street and talks to our first student and says, well, what is it you got to hand me? Tell me. And just took away that fear from her. Those kids told us afterwards, and this was not kids that I was working with personally, they just had come, said, we've never carried a Bible in public. We've never invited anybody to church. That was all a new experience to them. But they all felt changed by it. And they wouldn't tell you going home they did it perfectly. I think the underlying rule there is we just stopped being ashamed to, at some level, bring up the name of Jesus. And maybe that's where we need to push ourselves toward that root of being disciplined by the Lord. Bring his name up. What do you know about him? Where are you grounded? I don't know if that speaks to what you're talking about earlier.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes along with like, you remember the first time you asked a girl out?
I never asked anybody to Katie out. I can't remember.
Well, but you remember, like, that freaks you out, like I don't know. I mean, it's this thing where you're like, I don't even know what'll they say, and and what are you supposed to say, and how did it go in that movie I watched, and there's this whole thing, and then you just say something really stupid, and it works out fine, And then and I think that's a really lowly, but I think kind of meaningful analogy to what it's like when you're trying to do anything for the Lord. And I think about whether that's evangelism. I remember a conversation. I was like a new Christian, young teenager. I'd grown up on pews, all this stuff. And some of my friends, we were talking about like religion stuff, right? I mean, I grew up in a really religious area. People with different sort of, for lack of a better term, like brands of what it meant to follow Jesus. And so we were discussing some different points of doctrine. And like, basically what they did is like, they kept on asking these questions. And I kind of got back to the corner. They were like, wait a second. So you're saying if X, Y, Z is true, then I'm going to hell? And I was like, and then it was like, you do think that, don't you? And then like, I remember distinctly, and it became a big joke, right?
Yeah.
Like all of my friends in the circle, they were like, hey, do him. I remember one guy, do him. Is he going to hell? Is he going to hell? And I felt really, like, I remember going to bed and being like, wow, I guess I'm going to hell because I'm pretty sure I just did a really bad job at evangelism, like that's super bad.
Yeah.
But that's just how it goes. Like you try, I didn't want to say to that. I didn't want to think that. I didn't want to like try to whatever it was I said or didn't say or insinuated. And that goes for so many things. And I mean, I feel like I'm kind of angling toward evangelism with a lot of my things I'm highlighting here. But I think it goes for just taking a stand and be like, hey, listen, guys, I'm not going to tear down that person like you guys are. I know it's kind of funny, like what happened, and like we're all kind of talking, but I can't say that kind of. I don't feel like that's right.
Yeah.
Or whenever you're dating someone as a young person and they're like, hey, you just got out of the shower, right? Send me a picture, I got to be like, no, and we're done. Like I gotta take a stand on some of this stuff that I think it feels like weird or bad or just confusing or whatever. I got to figure out how to take a stand and be like, no, I got principles because I'm following this guy. I'm following this man who's God, and I believe in him and I love him and he means everything to me. So I'm not going to participate in that stuff. No, I'm not going to go out with you guys. I'm not going to lie to my parents. I'm not going to do all this stuff that everybody else is going to do. And of course that applies for the positive things like evangelism and service and all that. But it starts with developing that real character that says, I don't care how scary it is that you guys, to Jacob's point earlier about being free of other people's expectations. I don't care about that. I'm not afraid of you guys. Like if y'all all say that I'm a loser and you don't want to be my friends, I got one friend at least, and that's good enough,
Well, and that's a developed friend too. And I love that you brought that up. Experience is going to help this, but to every young person out there, the more you're afraid to do the right thing and cower to the wrong thing, those scars are going to build to where you're going to feel chained up, and cutting yourself won't cut it. So it's better to earlier on start making those decisions to stand up for the one friend who you're trying to believe in and see that he does deliver. I know Harry Potter's probably the wrong place to go in any Bible discussion, but that's just the way my mind works. I like the idea of those fears that face you and then being able to make it ridiculous. There's that idea of those, I forget what every Harry Potter fan is going to hate me right now. I just drew a blank.
The Mentor. I have not even read the books, but I did go to the play because my brother is super into Harry Potter. So like for his birthday, I got him tickets for the Broadway show. I knew nothing. I was like constantly in between brows, like, hey man, what's the deal with what's going on? So, but Dementors, I'm pretty sure is the term, I think.
Well, so the Dementors is the terrifying thing to most people. Well, there's one creature that would take on that look. And this reminds me of what Satan does because he walks about like a roaring lion. So our fears face us and it is horrifying. And the spell that gets rid of it in that particular case is ridiculoso. And the idea is that you think of something ridiculous. I think we ought to start really thinking of our fears that way because Satan is lion-like, but he has no roar next to the Lion of Judah. Our fears look real. I might lose my girlfriend. I might lose my friends. I might be unpopular. And if that's all that matters, then it is devastating. But if I could make it look ridiculous, like years down the road, and I can think as a young person, this got me through a lot of temptation. Because I thought years down the road, what's my wife going to think of this decision? What am I going to tell my kids about how I faced that fear? Something about consequences Jacob talked about earlier and responsibility. And as you're talking about development, it all plays into, let's stop pretending that we'll just be a strong Christian someday and putting the time in with the teacher now, putting the light into the dark places now so we can get used to not a life without fear, but a life that you know what, the one who can stop the storm is with me. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
Talon, you got any more on this?
Well, I was just thinking, I remember there was like plenty of times when I was younger that I was looking up to my dad or my grandparents and I thought they must have come to the age where they don't sin anymore. Like there's an age where they just don't feel tempted or they can't do anything wrong anymore. And that was just an image that I had made in my mind, and I had often been waiting to become of that age where, oh, I can't be tempted by anything anymore. Like there are no problems that can come to me. And as I get older, I realized that was something ridiculous that I made up in my mind about the reality of life. And as I keep getting older, I'm realizing, oh, I can't accomplish, I can't overcome struggle. I can't overcome temptation just by my own willpower or desiring for it. I have to constantly go to Jesus in the boat and be like, I'm in a storm. Or sometimes, even if it doesn't seem that big at the time, I don't recognize this can progress into something, a larger storm, something even more devastating, something perishing. And at any point in that, I can go to Jesus and say, I'm about to be in a storm. Lord, I've been in a storm for so long. Help me, I'm perishing. Ben, I know you've been in New York or Brooklyn for some time right now. Was there a time when you were thinking, this is a major catastrophe what am I supposed to do here? Or were you the entire time thinking, oh, this is no big deal, it's all in God's hands? Or how did you think that other people were perceiving the situation?
You mean like since the day we moved there, or are you talking about like what's been going on the past?
Since the day you moved there.
Good time, or was it like the whole time you thought it was a catastrophe? Because
we've talked about moving and what that can do to a family.
Yeah, right. You're talking about what's been going on recently, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what, man? I've had moments of like frustration, or just like a couple of days ago, I just really broke. Like I was by myself in the middle of like 8 different things. And I just kind of broke down crying more than I have in a very, very long time. I don't even know. And I'm not even sure what it was exactly. It just something kind of tipped, you know? Mm-hmm. For the most part, there's been so many things to do and so many needs to address. I haven't had a lot of time of like sitting back and thinking, wow, this is a catastrophe. There have always been a lot of frustrations, a lot of complications. But I will say, I think that's one way that God provides for us. If we really engage ourselves in serving others, it makes it easier to deal with your own stuff. Now, sometimes people do that to like mask their own problems, and I'm probably guilty of that sometimes. But if you're not masking, if you're really genuinely like, hey, I still got issues, I got things, but I'm pouring that energy into trying to help others, it helps. It's the days when I'm not doing enough for others that I tend to look inward and really have a big pity party, and then I got to screw my head right back on and say, okay, let's move forward and try to do what we can here. But I don't know if that's a very good answer to your question, but that's kind of what that's what I think about that.
That was great. No, that answered it perfectly. But also, like, you've been inside of your house for so long, and so you're so close with just a couple of people. And so you have to kind of keep trading off that, I've been with you for so long, but I still want to love you. I still want to have a healthy relationship somehow. So how do you combat like frustration in such a confined space?
You know what? If it wasn't for my wife and kids, I think we'd all be super frustrated being in a confined space of a Brooklyn apartment, you know? But frankly, that's been the thing I've realized that's been the thing that's kept me most joyful. And I haven't been like super Philippians Apostle Paul joyful, you know, or whatever the whole time. But the thing that has kept me joyful and at peace has been the times we've had together, which has been a lot of times. But the times where we're just hanging, we're just, you know, I don't know. We play tag. My kids are 3 and 1.5. So we play tag in the living room, which is like an 8-foot running area, but that's fun. That's awesome. You know, those kinds of things keep it great.
Hey, I know this, Ben. I could talk to you all night long. I'm so glad that you agreed to come in. We got a lot out of going through Mark 5 with you. I appreciate that, and the end of 4. I think we might have to find ways to talk some more. You're super encouraging. I know our hearts are with you. A lot going on in this world. We're going to end tonight in prayer. We're going to say goodbye to you here in a minute, but we're going to end tonight in prayer and just want our young people to know, like you said, the one who created the storm, the one who created the elements of the storm can control it, and we can trust him. And we'll just keep stepping forward, focused on him.
And can I add just one little thing?
Yep.
The biggest storm is whenever I mess up in the biggest ways, the storms I create. And I don't think I emphasized this enough earlier, but I want to say it right now to anybody who's really struggling and they have made some huge mess ups and they think like there's no way out. Fix your eyes on Jesus on the cross, because that's the biggest message, the biggest billboard to say, hey, whatever you did, I got you. And we got to believe in that. We got to come with all our stuff and let him kind of patch it up and fix it and put our clothes back on and break us free from the chains and all those kinds of things. That's so important because, man, guilt and shame and feeling like you're a lost cause, it's just not true. And those are lies. So if anybody's feeling that, God bless you. I pray for you. I love you. I feel you on that. Don't let it keep you down. Just keep on coming back. Thank you guys for having me. This was so fun, and I really appreciate it. So thanks. Love you and miss you, Josh. Talon, good to meet you.
Good to meet you also,
Ben. You too, Ben. God bless.